Hey, everybody. It is Kelly Nielsen here at Grace for Living After Loss. And on this channel, we are dedicated to providing tips, tools, and resources for recovering from grief and loss and getting back to living a life that you love. And this series specifically is what we're calling our loss interview series. So we are talking to different types of people from all walks of life with all different types of loss. And our hope is that you will find a person that you will connect with and resonate with. Either their type of loss might be similar to yours, or their experience may be similar to yours. And we just want to share what their experience was like and glean whatever wisdom and insight that we can pull from them that will hopefully help you in your grief recovery journey. But my largest hope for you out of this is that you will know, number one, that you're not alone. And number two, that you can recover from this, and that we're going to give you so many examples of that so that it will hopefully encourage you on your journey. And I'm so excited to have Lindy Carter with me today. She's graciously and generously offered to share her experience, her story, her testimony, and her strength, because she has overcome tremendous grief and loss in her life, and she carries a lot of wisdom. So I'm thrilled to have her. Lindy, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get started, if you could just, as much as you're willing or comfortable to share about who you lost, when you experienced the loss, and just kind of the circumstances around the loss.
Well, it was my late husband, and I lost him to suicide about 5 years ago or so. And we had a long history. He was my first boyfriend, and we dated for a few years, and then we, split up, and then we went our separate ways, but kept in touch sort of on and off over the years. And then, as years went by, things were going south in the relationships that we were both in. And so once those were over, we decided we were going to give it another shot, and we got back together, and we eventually got married, and it was great. I mean, it was really wonderful. He had a lot of struggles with, he had been in a car accident when he was 19. And so he had a lot of chronic pain and different things. And he worked in a very physical business. He was a contractor and a carpenter, very, very, very talented at that. But as the years went by and he started to age, obviously these things got worse. And so by the time we got married, he was living with some pretty serious chronic pain. And neither one of us really thought about that figuring into our relationship as far as it being negative. And as time went by, he really struggled to the point where he couldn't work anymore. He had to go on disability, which then caused him to really be unhappy and depressed and overwhelmed most of the time. And I was kind of working as much as I could to keep us afloat. And so our relationship started to suffer, which was something we never expected, because we had such a close relationship, even as friends, over the years. Basically he was my best friend. So it was really difficult. So, and I think that's, I guess maybe unique or not. I mean, lots of times I've spoken with other people who've experienced a similar thing, like lost a loved one to suicide, and they were blindsided. They said, I just had no idea, or I knew that they had struggles, but I thought they were doing better. And in his case, I same thing. I thought he was doing a little bit better, but I also did know too. He threatened a few times, and I actually prevented it. And he was seeing a counselor, and I strongly encouraged him to talk these things through with the counselor. The fact that he actually had a gun in hand a couple times and was threatening to do it, and I kind of talked him down, so to speak. And he was never violent towards me. So even the day that it happened, I had to be kind of commanded by the person on the other end on 911 to leave the house, because I was just would never cross my mind that he would hurt me, which he didn't. But I mean, I just was like, no, I'm fine. And they're like, no, you have to leave. So it all kind of unfolded where, I came home from working after overnight, and he was pretty much at that point, and he has actually asked me to leave the house too. So I left the house and then called the police, and they came, and it took hours and hours to get into the house because, the doors were locked, and on and on and on. So, so it was very surreal. And I know that other people who've experienced this say the same thing. And I mean, I worked at the time, I'm a hospice nurse, but at the time I had stepped away from hospice for a couple of years and was working back in behavioral health nursing, which was the first thing I had done in my career years earlier. So I was working in a behavioral health unit, dealing with this kind of stuff all the time. Plus I had, quite a lot of hospice experience. And when it was happening to me, it was just like, again, it was very surreal. And I
Yeah.
had to call a friend of mine and say, I know I'm a professional, but I'm a little like, what do I do? Like, I'm not sure what I should do right now. And she said the same thing. She said, you need to leave the house, call 911, let them handle it. This is, you just need to go. So I did. Matter of fact, I ended up going to work that night, which people think is bizarre, but there was nobody here. Like, I live in an area, where even my closest friend, who lived in this area, who was from New Jersey, she was away. She was seeing family a couple states away. So there was really nobody I felt comfortable, like even going to their house or anything. And I just felt like I couldn't stay in the house that night. I just needed some time. So I went into work late, and they knew what happened because they had come out and they had brought him to the hospital, actually, where I worked, because where I worked at the time was the county hospital where the county morgue was. And so I didn't even realize they knew. And I, called and said, I'm coming to work. And they're like, no, you're not. And they told me that, the nursing supervisor, realized who he was and so forth. And I said, no, I have to come in. And so they had other nurses who were, kind of poised to work and take over. And they actually didn't let me see patients that night. I was kind of working almost like in the CNA capacity, because I just told myself I just need to be here tonight. And so they were wonderful. I mean, I couldn't have been in a better work situation when that happened, to be honest. They did, and they were supportive in the months following as well. But I think the thing that surprised me the most afterward was the stigma. And intellectually, I knew there was a stigma to suicide because, of course, over the years when I had heard of different people who, we knew personally, or my family knew personally, or even people like in the media, like more famous people and so forth, I knew that there was a stigma attached to it. But I think unless you live it, like anything else, like if a loved one is murdered or overdoses or suicide, any of those very traumatic or even, like serious accidents and things like that, any of those kind of traumatic deaths, I think you just don't realize that people are really uncomfortable with those and don't want to talk about it and don't really, I mean, we don't know what to do around grief anyway, like we don't know what to say to people, and we shy away from it to begin with just because of the way our culture is. But when it's those kind of deaths, it's even more so. So I think the stigma was what really just made me feel even more isolated. And then I actually even had people who criticized me publicly, like on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was really, I joined a couple of support groups on Facebook because I was really struggling. And I was shocked to hear how many similar stories like that there were. People in their family had said, oh, it was your fault, or you should have done something. And I had a couple of family members, not my family, but on his side of the family, as well as, some older friends of his who we hadn't been in touch with in years, who, because I was very transparent about it. Like I did announce it on Facebook for people who, because we didn't live in the state we grew up in anymore. We lived in North Carolina. We weren't from North Carolina. So there were a lot of people I thought, well, I just, he knew a lot of people between his business and the fact that he was just a really, nice, friendly, outgoing guy, knew lots of people. And I just kind of knew that people would probably want to know. And so I wasn't going to hide it. And I was very transparent about it. And I had people, be very critical. Like, you're a nurse. How did you know? You've known him for years. How did you not know this was going to happen? And I almost felt like the deep, dark secret was, well, I kind of did know, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. And that's what I felt guilty about for a long time. I kind of almost like bought into the idea that, I should have done something and it really was my fault. So that guilt was with me for quite a while. And then when I finally got past that, I still felt like, well, I mean, there's just something I should have been able to do about it. And then when I realized I couldn't, I felt bad about and didn't want to be honest about the fact that, well, I did kind of know he was going to do it. And I left the house. Why did I leave? Like all those things that you question, like, why didn't I come over? Or why not, like people always question themselves of the should-haves and the would-haves and that kind of thing. So, so that was a very difficult part of it too.
Yeah. And there's a couple things that you've said a lot, and I want to like highlight a couple things that I want to make sure people hear. Right. And so the first one I want you to hear is that we recognize and we've experienced that there are stigmas and people treat you differently based on the type of loss. So if you've been through, a suicide or something like that and you're experiencing that, please know that you're not alone. I hate that you're not alone, right? I hate that that's such a common experience for so many of us, but it is unfortunately a regular thing. And I think specifically in suicide, we all want someone to blame, right? Like we all just want someone to like put all this emotion on, all this anger, all this confusion, all this, we have a
Mhm.
really hard time accepting that our loved one would make that choice and do that, and so it's a natural thing to try to find a thing to blame, right? Like a
Mhm.
medication or a person or someone dropped the ball somewhere or whatever. And so I just want to encourage you, if people are projecting that stuff on you, to not accept it, right? To just let it wash off. That's their grief talking. That's them trying to make sense of something that can't be made sense of, and that's their best attempt at it. I know it doesn't make it any less hurtful, but I just want you to hear that it's not you personally. They're just kind of projecting that stuff on you. The other thing you said that was so good, which unfortunately so many people deal with, is the guilt, right? The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And I just, again, want to encourage you, if you're watching this video, address that. Don't ignore that, and don't let that stuff just continue to stay in your mind. Because as you said, until you address that, you're not going to be able to move forward in your recovery. Like those questions that haunt your mind, and they're stealing energy from you, and it's stealing your peace. And you have to find some tools and help to actually resolve that stuff once and for all. And so whether that's a counselor or with our company with grief coaching or whatever, that, there's a bunch of ways you can do it. But I just want to encourage people, don't let the guilt go unchecked. Don't let the guilt just kind of exist and be there, because it will hinder your ability to recover and move on in a meaningful way. And so I just know a lot of people that they go a long time before they address it. And so I just want to encourage people, address it as humanly possible, as soon as possible, so that you can deal with that stuff. Okay, so the question I would like to ask, you left work, or you went to work because you couldn't be back in the house. Talk to me about when you had to be back in the house, how that was like
good
for
question.
you. What did you do to navigate that?
Wow, that was tough. I mean, and of course I hadn't slept because I worked nights, and so I came home that morning, and this all unfolded. And then I was couldn't go back to the house for many hours until they finally got in, and then they kind of had to clear the scene and so forth. And they had the detective came and talked to me, and the nurse coroner, and they had a chaplain come. And so, I mean, it was great. I mean, the support, I have to say, this community was really, really wonderful. And then even afterward, when I finally kind of revealed to my neighbors what had happened, because, they saw all the police and everything, and they were wondering, like, oh, what the heck happened? And I told people, and people I didn't even know in my neighborhood, were just really reached out and were very supportive and so forth. So I really got a lot of support. So I don't want to make it sound like, oh, poor me, like I was, but it was, like I said, it was just very disturbing and shocking that other people who I actually knew, were
that
so
you
critical.
thought would be supportive, right? Isn't that the way? The people that you thought would be there and would be understanding and kind don't, and then total strangers or people that you hardly know show up with like an immense kindness. Yeah, that's such
and
a
people,
common
and even a couple of people at work approached me and said, I had a similar experience, or I had someone in my family die from suicide too, and reached out and said, "Tom, you want to talk?" Which I, and they were coworkers who I didn't really know very well, so it was really that part of it. I just wanted to bring out, because I think there are that's very wonderful. There are a lot of people out there who are willing, even if they don't know what to say or do, they are willing to help. So anyway, to answer your question, I came home that morning, and I expected there really to be more of a mess, because he used a gun. I mean, he shot himself. So, and it really wasn't as bad as I expected. But it was enough. I mean, I had some cleaning up to do, which is what I kind of busied myself with. But I was so exhausted, because I hadn't slept since like the day before. Like I had been up for like almost 48 hours.
Yeah.
And so, when you're sleep deprived on top of everything else, all the emotions and stuff, it was just, it all kind of hit me at one time. And I basically, because I walked back in the house and like everything was still here, like his slippers and his stuff. And, and that's what happens when somebody dies, especially when it's sudden, like even if they're taken away to the hospital or, whatever happens, like you have to kind of deal with the fact that you're in this environment now and that person's gone. And I have to say, I did quite a bit of screaming, stomping around the house and crying. And I was angry at him. That's when the initial anger came out at him. Because the thing was, I understood, I knew what his life was like. He was never pain-free. He had, even though he was on medication and so forth, which did help, and he had surgery, he had pain 24/7. Which, unless you live that, and I don't have that, but unless you experience that yourself or live with someone or love someone who's gone through that, you just don't realize how much that affects your life and how horrible that is, and how much stigma is attached to that. You know, when you need more medication, they think you're a drug user and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's attached there. And so I understood why he did it. So I had, on one hand, I had empathy for him, but on the other hand, I was just so angry. And that was what came out that first, when I came back into the house, was that I was like kind of throwing things around, and I was just, I eventually ended up calling a friend of mine, just to talk it through, because I knew that, she didn't have a similar experience, but she's just a very empathetic person. And I knew that she would help. And then basically I just kind of, finally went to bed. It was exhausted and slept for like 12 hours. And when I got up the next day after that, it was a little, I wouldn't say easier, but things felt a little clearer to me. And I was able to kind of sit down and go, okay, who do I need to call? Who do I need to tell? What do I need to do? Like those kinds of things. But again, I didn't really have anybody to help me.
Right.
Part of it was because I'm not a very independent person who, even though people did offer, I even had people offer, friends of mine who offered to come and stay, who lived in the different states. Listen, I'll take a few days off from work. I'll come and stay and help you out. And I almost didn't want like anybody in the space. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I just need to I need some time to work this through myself. And so I think that was a part of it that really overwhelmed me too, that I forgot that there's like all these things that it's almost like, and this happens with any kind of a death, but there were other things too that I had to deal with, like, with like the police report and the different things that come with a death like that are different than other situations. But just all the stuff you have to deal with on the back end. And, yes, so much administrative stuff.
In hindsight, if you could go back, or in hindsight, if someone stumbles across this video and they're in the very early stages of a very similar experience, like in hindsight, would you recommend to them to have somebody come help them?
Yes.
Or do you?
Yes. Yes, I would not. I would say, don't do what I did and say no and push people away, because that was just my way of dealing with grief. That's was how I was raised, be very stoic. And, my father died when I was 19, very suddenly. And so I had a kind of an earlier experience with a sudden death, and that was how my mother handled it. And so, that's kind of how it was modeled in my family. And so that's how I've always dealt with grief over there, which is kind of how I ended up becoming a grief coach to begin with, because when I became a nurse coach and I was trying to figure out what area I really wanted to concentrate on, and I was thinking, oh yeah, end of life, because I have hospice experience, but then the grief thing just kept coming back up because of all the losses I had in my life and the experiences that I had. I would say, don't grieve that way. If you, even if that's your usual way, if people offer, then take it. Even if it's people you don't know very well. Like I had a neighbor who called me and said, listen, we don't know what to do for you, but we want to do something. What is there anything around the house, in the yard, anything that, and there was some, we'd had a tree come down a few months earlier, and, we had cut it up, but the stumps and everything was, the mess was kind of still there. And I said, well, if somebody could clean up the yard for me a little bit, like that would be wonderful. Well, she organized this group of guys in the neighborhood, and they came over one day and went to work and cleaned out cleaned my whole yard. And I was just, like, wow. But in hindsight, I was really glad that I did that. I hesitated. Oh no, I'm okay. And then I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm okay thing again. This is a few weeks after he had died. I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, that would be nice if they could do something like that.
Yeah. And I'm impressed and proud that you had the cognitive skills to even like remember that was a thing, and to put two and two together that would be helpful. That's one of the things, and I think I might make a kind of how to help someone who's grieving document, because everybody says, let us know what we can do to help, or let us know if there's anything that you need. And it's like, when we're in that beginning stage, like our brains aren't working. Like we're lucky if you remember to shower or eat or any of that kind of stuff. So like to have the wherewithal to even know what you need, and then the humility to articulate it and say, yeah, I really need this is very rare, and so.
And it's very hard. I mean, I struggle with it too. That was like one of those little moments where I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And I think part of it was because I felt more, I don't know if other people experience this as well. So I want to say this as well, just in case anybody else does. I felt more comfortable accepting the help from people who didn't know me or didn't know us very well. Because I felt like I wasn't going to have to answer a lot of questions. So people who were closer, I kind of pushed away because I wasn't ready to answer questions and so forth. And so people who were, I didn't know very well, I was actually more willing to
detached,
say, oh yeah,
or
sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No problem. You know, like, and I kind of let them reach out, and I actually accepted the help from somebody who, you know, wasn't really a friend, you know, because I just, that was more comfortable for me. So I just wanted to say that in case there's any other people out there like me who did kind of deal with things the same way, that if that's how you're feeling, it's okay, and go ahead and accept the help. You know, don't say no just because you don't know them very well. So,
and actually,
if people offer, they want to do it, you know, so say yes, you know.
Yeah, and I'm going to put the link, especially under this video. So our grief survival guide, the very first thing that we list is, I call it a grief buddy, but somebody to help coordinate things and kind of, you know, be a mouthpiece, right? Be the communication, and then just kind of, because it's common sense, right? Like, you're going to need groceries, you're going to need this and that, but for someone to kind of be that role. And I recommend that it's like the further removed they are from the loss, the better, because your close family and friends, they're grieving too, and they have their own, like, they have their own stuff to deal with. So if you can find a little bit more, someone you trust, obviously, and feel comfortable with, but, you know, a coworker or a friend or a neighbor that's a little bit far removed, that is willing and able to help you in that capacity, is like a game changer when it comes to the beginning of grief. And so my hope would be, so if you're watching this and you're in the early stages, please try to find somebody like that for you. Okay, so I want to ask two other questions, and I know we're already going on a half an hour. So one is, talk to me a little bit about, and you already alluded to, people you knew saying hurtful things and everything else. Another like universal experience for people is that when you go through loss, your relationships change, right? And the nature of your relationships, the way that it works, and that can be really painful for people. Like we said, when you're expecting people to support you and love you, and they're either unwilling or unable to do that, it's hard, right? And then as time goes on, how to talk to people, it affects a lot of relationships. So talk to me a little bit now, especially that you're 5 years out. How did it change your relationships, either with family members or friends? Like, what is the biggest change you saw in the relationships around you, and how did you navigate that?
Well, it didn't. Fortunately for me, there was not any like significant relationship that ended because of it or that changed dramatically. But some people did pull away initially, and there were some people who were there in the beginning who I think it just became too much for, and they pulled away as well. So there's some people who I was friends with or friendly with at the time who I'm not really in touch with any longer. And it's not like there's hard feelings or anything. They just kind of drifted away. So I think that's a common experience too, is that you may have some dramatic thing where somebody just can't deal with it, or somebody's really nasty. Like the people who were not nice to me were people that I wasn't really close to begin with. There were some kind of older friends of his from years ago. And actually the nice thing too was that there were some older friends of his who reached out, you know, like who contacted me via Facebook, and who I'm now still friends with, who were just wonderful. You know what I mean? Like, and I just thought, oh my gosh, all his old friends are going to hate me, type of thing. And that wasn't the case. So, and it was also his family, but he had been estranged from them for quite a few years to begin with. So, and part of the issue was that he had not wanted me to tell them if anything ever did happen to him. Like, we'd had these discussions since I worked in end of life care, and we had our will and all that kind of stuff. You know, we taught our living will and so forth. We talked about this stuff quite a bit. And so he made me promise not to tell, you know, certain people in his family. So I didn't, and they found out, and that was what a lot of their anger was about. So those relationships are, I mean, that I don't speak to them at all anymore, just because that's just done. So any kind of reconciliation I was hoping for with them, that's long gone. So, but it again, what my experience was that I felt again like it was my fault. Like, even though I knew, and other people were telling me that there was another person in the family who I have on his side of the family who I've kept in touch with, who's wonderful too. And she told me many times, like, it's not your problem, it's them, you know, so don't feel like bad about it. But it's hard not to. It's hard not to take that responsibility on yourself.
Right.
So,
and especially when we're wanting and needing love and support and acceptance, it's really hard if those people are unable to give it. It's like the time in our life when we need it the most, right? Like we need our people to like love us well during that season. And more often than not, it's really hard for people to love you well in that season, because
I mean, I felt like I was respecting Right. I
Yeah.
felt like I was respecting his wishes. I'm like, he was my husband, and I'm the one still left here to speak for him and to protect him. And so I felt like I was doing the right thing. Yeah. I mean, and I even felt bad because I was like, well, I'm the one who used to tell him all the time, you really need to like bury the hatchet with them and reconcile. And even if you don't relationship, each other and blah, blah, blah. And he never did, before he died. And so then that all kind of blew back on me. So it was difficult.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question I want to ask is, and obviously you were familiar, had done hospice care and nursing and everything else. Talk to me a little bit about when you started to embrace recovery for yourself, right? Like you're shocked, you're numb, it's really hard. Like, and what did you do? Like how soon after the loss, and what did you do for your own recovery? Like talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was another thing that brought criticism to my door, because I actually kind of not bounced back, but started taking those steps early on. Like I tried not to isolate myself. I did go out and do things. I actually started seeing somebody not too long after that happened, because like I said, we had been struggling in our relationship. So not that the relationship was over, like the marriage was over or anything, but we'd had a lot of these struggles, and I had already, when you're struggling in a long-term relationship, you already have those thoughts like, well, what if we do split up? What am I going to do? What am I going to, so you're already kind of thinking that way, which people didn't understand either. And so I actually was just a few months after he died that I started seeing somebody, and we got married. I mean, I remarried. We got married about a year or so later. And so, like I said, so that brought quite a bit. I mean, my close friends and family were wonderfully supportive and welcomed him, and his family welcomed me, and it was great. But there were people who were sort of like, really, that kind of thing. Like, and people who said, oh, she must have been seeing, the same thing. She must have been seeing him before, and that was why he killed himself, and this and that, and all those that kind of gossip and stuff went on. So, but yeah, I just that's kind of how I handle things. Like even when I lose a pet, like I know a lot of people don't get another pet right away. Even though I'm struggling, with the fact that I've lost the pet, I still, I kind of feel like, well, there's so many out there who need homes. I'm going to adopt another one as soon as I possibly feel ready, as soon as I can. Yeah. So that I just started doing it, fairly early on within the first few months. But it was gradual, and I felt guilty about that too. You know what I mean? Like there were certain things I did, I think I might have done a little bit too soon. Yeah. So I kind of caution people to kind of like, trust your own timing. Like even if you're, people are saying, oh, maybe you should do this. If you really don't feel ready, then just wait. And it's okay. Because time frame wise, it's different for everybody. So.
Yeah. And certainly like for dating after loss of a spouse, as opposed to but embracing the work of recovery, like the little plug that I want to give is like, as soon as humanly possible, like as soon as you have the inkling or feel, because the analogy I often use is, and as a nurse, like if you have surgery or a major injury, they want you up and out of bed like ASAP, like because they know that the sooner you get moving, the better it's going to be, the quicker your recovery is going to be.
And I want to use an analogy there as a nurse too, if you don't mind. That hurts. You know what I mean? Like they have to that's painful. You know what I mean? Like it's not easy to do rehab right away. It's not easy. I mean, I remember my late husband had his back surgery, and he knew that as well. So he forced himself to get up and walk down the hall the first day after the surgery, and it was hell, but and it's the same thing emotionally. Like when you're grieving, it's the same exact thing. It hurts like hell, but you have to do it.
It hurts and you don't want to do it, and it'd be much easier to just curl up and be comfortable and whatever. But grief, if you choose to do that, it's not going anywhere. And whenever you do choose to embrace it, it's still going to hurt, right? And all you've lost is however much time you've been curled up. And so an encouragement from both of us, I'm just going to say, I was going to say as soon as you feel ready, but I want to even say even before you feel ready.
I think you're right. Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah, like you might not just start doing it. Just start.
And it's okay to have those times when you do curl up in a ball and you don't want to go out and you refuse an invitation. So for them, and then you got to take care of yourself. And so that it's okay to have those times. But you're right. As soon as you have that little inclination, don't push it away and say, oh, but I'm not going to go, or I don't want to, just give it a chance. Just do it, and see how it lands with you and see how you do. And if it is a little bit too much for you, then okay, then, you know next time to proceed a little bit more slowly. But I agree with you. The sooner the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we've given a couple bits of advice throughout the video, but so if you could just had like one thing, so people are finding this video, spouses who've lost their loved one to suicide, or maybe other people who've lost loved ones to suicide, and they're resonating. If you could give them, sum up like one bit of advice, one piece of encouragement, what would you want to say to them?
Talk about it. You know, I felt so guilty about my role, what I thought my perceived role was in it, that I didn't talk about it. And I think that delayed my recovery as well. It's important, like when somebody dies in a more natural circumstance, you know, what do we do at the wake and all that kind of stuff? We talk about them. You know, people need to talk about their loved ones, and that's a really good thing that you can do for people who are grieving, like just listen or tell them a funny story, you know, about that person from long ago that they might not know, like those kinds of things. So my biggest takeaway, I think, would be to just, if you want to talk about it and need to, like you said, find those people you feel safe with and just talk about the person or talk about the loss, and don't hold back.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, I worked with, and like we said, the stigma, right? Whether it's overdose or suicide or whatever it is. I remember I worked with a mother one time that her child had died of an overdose, and it had been a year since the passing. And we had an event, and she shared with us the story of what happened. And she said, this is the first time I've said it out loud. She had been carrying it around for a year without saying it out loud. And what I've learned about our neurological systems is that when thoughts and things take up room up here and we don't let it out through journaling or talking, it's better to talk. It actually carries emotional weight and energy. And just the act of talking about it will help to release that energy and not have it be so big or looming in your mind. And so that's such a great encouragement. I want to encourage anybody watching, if you've been carrying stuff around, you're carrying the memory around, you haven't found a place or a way to talk about it, please go find someone or reach out to us so that you can talk about it, because it's just going to get heavier. You know, it just is taking up room that it's renting, you know, it's living rent free in your brain, and like it doesn't deserve to take up that space. There's much better things and experiences to fill your mind with than to be carrying that around. So
and another thing I would say too is the languaging too. Like there's a big push in our culture now to, like, you know, kind of soften things, like don't say somebody killed themselves, or don't say somebody died by suicide. There's just like softer ways. If you, as the person who experienced the loss, want to say my such and such committed suicide, because there's a big thing about that. Oh, they didn't commit anything. It's like committing a crime and so forth. Whatever you believe. But if you feel comfortable, and because I work in the medical field and end of life care and stuff, I feel more comfortable with using those words. So don't worry about what other people are going to think.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
don't
like,
let
if that feels more comfortable to you.
Yeah.
Right.
You
you
into
feel
what
comfortable
you
saying, or if you want to use the softer language and that's more comfortable for you, that's fine too. But yeah, if you want to just come out and say it, don't try to spare other people's feelings. Their feelings are not what really matters at that particular moment. It's yours. So
right. Love that. Well, Lindy, it's such a pleasure. You're such a pillar of strength and an inspiration to me. And I know so many people who find this video are going to be encouraged and inspired, and hopefully more equipped now to, embrace this journey that is grief recovery. And so if you're checking out this video and this is the first time you're connecting with us, hit subscribe below to get a bunch of more videos that are all dedicated to helping you recover from grief and loss. So until next time, guys, we will see ya.
Thanks so much.